Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Linda.
I'm Seth.
I'm Charles.
And today we're going to be talking about Apple's new series on Foundation, which I think is pretty fantastic so far. Definitely, for me, worth the price of an Apple TV membership. Seth, I think, is the only one of us that hasn't seen any of it yet, but let's jump down to Chris. Chris, what are your thoughts? You're about as far into it as we are, I think.
Yeah, I'm about episode 6, and I think I'm about halfway through that episode. They're about hour-long episodes, and it's pretty good.
Have you read the books?
I have not read the book. So for
Okay.
those that aren't familiar with the Foundation series, it is based off of an Isaac Asimov book series. It's not one of the ones of his that I've read, like I, Robot, or a couple of his other ones, like Castle of Metal or Steel or something like that. But it's one of his many book series that he's written. But I enjoyed it. It was a little bit slow at times for me. I was pretty tired yesterday, and that's when I started it, and I just binged most of it. And ultimately, there were parts where the talking was just kind of droning, and I'd catch myself drifting off, and I'd have to pause it, go back,
Right.
and continue watching it. But that's not to say that it wasn't good. That was just tired. But it does move at pace at times, and other times it's a little bit slow. But it's because they're building. There's a lot of things going on. And ultimately, I'm not familiar with the story, but these 3 men here are basically clones. They're all the same guy, Brother Dusk, Brother Day, and Brother Dawn.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a pretty cool concept of how this one emperor, they call him Empire, I think, how he's going to rule basically forever. How do you ensure that you keep things the same and how you want it? Well, you clone yourself, and when you die, your younger self takes over, and you just keep repeating that pattern. So at any given time, this planet, anyways, this much bigger world around this, is ruled by Brother Dusk, Day, and Dawn. And as the older one retires, the Day becomes Dusk.
Yep.
Yes, and then Dawn
becomes Day.
Day, yeah. So there's a whole rotation thing that happens. But that's probably one of the coolest things out of the series that I liked. But for anyone not familiar with it, basically the way the series starts out is there's this mathematician whose name is
Harry Seldon.
Seldon, yep. Who
Played by Jared Harris.
Yeah, really great acting.
Yep.
From him, and he has this equation that basically, to him, math solves everything, and it also tells you behaviors, at least in larger populations, of what's going to happen. It all comes down to a number, and or probabilities or whatever. So he has basically predicted, or he's stating that the math proves that this empire is going to come to an end. There's going to be thousands of years of just basically turmoil. And they cover the specifics in that in the series, but naturally the empire does not approve and appreciate what he's saying. He's seen as kind of a heretic, and his followers are going to be they're basically committing treason and all this stuff. And he's like, look, it's just math. It's what the math says. And he says it's inevitable what's going to happen, but you can take steps to slow it down. So in Foundation, basically, these people end up getting exiled out into some remote planet to start their own kind of colony, is kind of, banishment. And it kind of covers the happenings down on where Empire is ruling, and this colony that's growing out in the vast wilderness of space, and kind of the happenings that are going on from there up to the point of where I've watched. So, but it's been pretty good. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, there are times where things got a little bit slow, and just kind of some dull talking, but then there are episodes where things pick up pretty quick and there's a lot of things going on. Very intelligently made. A lot of philosophies in there. You can see certain aspects where people turn away from technology because of their faith, and things like that, and you get the rubbing up against that, where like, well, that doesn't make any sense, like you're gonna die if you keep doing this. And it's like, oh no, you're telling me this math stuff and I don't care, it's math and it's banned, and you should be like, we even get down to what was it, they banned books, Bill, or they banned all science.
Yeah, they banned all education basically and destroyed the universities, destroyed books, and anybody that's found with books, they will be this planet that they're on, where this particular thing is taking place. And that's Gail Dornick that we see there in this picture. So she's got a great aptitude for math, much like Harry Seldon, and eventually becomes sort of an acolyte of his. But in this scene, she's on her home world there, and you can see that they're in boats, and basically the entire planet is kind of an advanced stage of where our planet is heading, where there's global warming basically, and the entire planet's flooding. And you see that even in some of the one of the universities that she visits at one point, that's all flooded out. And so she's trying to warn them that the math is predicting that this is just going to get worse, and nobody wants to believe her. And when they find people with books, they're typically tied to their books, and their hands are bound, and they're pushed into the ocean to drown and sink to the bottom. So they basically, they have this god that they worship, the sleeping god or whatever, and he's going to make sure that they're all okay. So fortunately for her, she's able to get a message off planet to Harry Seldon for this, sending in a result of like a competition. And so he sends a ship for her and gets her off the planet, and that's kind of her salvation in the whole thing. And so Harry, like Chris said, Harry's got this mathematical discipline that he's developed that predicts the movement of large groups of people. You can't, his math does not go so far as to say this specific person is going to have this happen at a certain point. But over time, this is where things are going.
But his labels into it was psychohistory.
Psychohistory is what the discipline is called. And so he basically informs the emperor that the empire is going to fall. There's no stopping it. You can delay it, he tells the emperor, if you resign as emperor, which of course
that went over well.
Yeah, that's a non-starter. So he said, well, so what good, at this point you've predicted the end. How is that going to help us? You predicted the end of the empire. Why should we not just kill you? What's the advantage of keeping you around? And he said, well, if you kill me and you don't do anything about this, there's going to be 10,000 years of a dark age, because everything's going to crash and come down so hard that it's going to be basically galactic wars, and it'll be dark ages for 10,000 years. And he said, if you listen to me and you follow my advice, we can reduce that interregnum between, valid functioning empires to merely 1,000 years. And he said, not only that, but he said, by doing this, you can preserve your legacy. And his proposal is to the emperor that allow me and my people to go create this galactic encyclopedia, this galactic warehouse of information of the human race, that so that when this 1,000 years is over, we don't have to start from scratch then learning how to build the wheel. We've got all of this information, and it's in these repositories, and humanity can access it and rebuild faster, and we can get out of this in 1,000 years versus 10,000. So the emperor reluctantly agrees to do this, and that's where Chris said the emperor doesn't want to kill Harry, because then he believes that's going to just accelerate. Basically. Yeah, it'll be a martyr. It'll accelerate the downfall of the emperor. But he said, if I act like I'm supporting him, but I send him out to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where he's sort of, out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing, I don't have to worry about him, and maybe the empire won't fall. And so that's his status, not knowing that all along that's exactly what Harry wanted, was to be sent out to the edges, so that he's out away from all of these wars and stuff that's going to take everything out. So he's kind of mind,
go ahead. When you say Harry had planned that was his math. He used his math to basically deduce, here's the percentage of this happening in this event. And again, he already knows the next 10 steps, based off of his equation. So he knew when he brought Gal on board what would happen, that she wouldn't be, executed, or that he wouldn't be executed, that they'd be banished. He knew what planet they would be banished to, because of logical reasoning and the math that he's done. So he can easily kind of predict that. And we'll get into some cool math stuff later too that happens in the colony when you start building out, because there's that coin flipping scene that blew my mind.
Right.
We'll get back to that, but yeah.
Yeah. And the one of the quotes that comes up fairly frequently with Harry and Gale when they're talking about future events, and a point at which, the emperor hasn't decided yet if he's going to kill both of them or whatever. And Harry's constantly, saying, well, there is a non-zero chance that we could both be killed. Right? Yeah. And which is to say that it's possible, but according to my math, we should be okay. But there is a non-zero chance.
The number's there. It's non-zero, but it's there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I have read the books. I actually started reading the books this summer.
Oh, great. Okay.
And so I'm almost all the way through the last one. There's 7 books in the series. And so I'm just about halfway through the last one right now. It's the series is a lot different than the books. And really it kind of has to be because the books take place over 1,000 years. And so you're constantly going from characters that live their lives and die to new characters. And that would have been very difficult for audiences to follow along, because you like to find your heroes, your characters, and follow them through this series. And the same was true with the Emperor. There was, every 100 years or 80 years or whatever, there was a new emperor. And so for the series, in order to give us an identifiable face of the empire, they created this idea of the cloning, the brother dawn, day and dusk kind of a thing, so that we can stick and have a recognizable face of the empire. And then the thing they did with Gail Dornick, where she ended up, in sort of a suspended animation mode for a while, right? To get her into the future. Yeah. And we'll probably find out that something similar maybe has happened to Harry. We don't know yet. We're getting to that. But so anyway, so those pieces are a little bit different. And I can understand why they did that. And for me, it didn't really ruin the movie. But I will say, in the books, Harry Seldon and the guy that plays his adopted son, Rach, they were inseparable buddies. And when, we saw the show go to the point where
Spoilers.
Rach kind of turns on him, and I don't
Yep.
want to, do too many spoilers there. Well, first they had like an argument in the
there's
lunchroom on
definitely
board the
disagreement
ship.
or something going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
right?
And then you see that escalate later on substantially. I was really bummed because I'm like, well, that's not at all how this is supposed to work. But then as you get more episodes into it, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I see what they're doing here. So yeah, so now it's beginning to make more sense. And I having read the books and seeing the series, I really like the series. I like the
Yeah.
books.
Mhm.
The series is really great. The books are kind of dry because it's all about, it's a lot more about the evolution of this empire as it goes along and this mathematics and how he's trying to shape the future, which could have made for quite a dry series. But they've really kind of spiced it up and put a lot of action into it compared to what the book had. And so I'm sold on it. I can't wait for that. I mean, we watch it, Lynn and I watch it usually on Sundays with a couple other friends, and we watch it and we're like, oh man, I can't believe we got to wait another week to find out where this is going. So yeah, we really like it. And
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, like I said, I was tired yesterday when I was watching it, but I still watched through almost 6 full episodes.
Well,
Yeah.
They're about an hour long.
Right.
If I could, well, my week watching this and then Dune,
Yeah.
think together was a mistake, but because the first episode here, and I almost gave up. The first episode, there's a lot of awe they're filming,
yeah,
and which I hate, and it's one of those things that I don't like watching on film. Awe's one of them, and thinking's another, which I think happens a lot in Dune.
yes,
But at the end of the first episode, where you've spent this time watching all this stuff in awe, which was frustrating for me, and then you watch it get destroyed. That was interesting. That was, I don't know if it was fun, but
That was
But it
mutually
seemed-
fulfilling.
it was something.
Yeah, like I can
there-
get behind this. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that might have been my question for Charles that I was thinking about earlier before we started the show was, would you have ridden on that elevator going up to
Oh
that?
my God,
that
the
space elevator.
Elevator.
Yeah.
That was it.
Would you do that?
I wouldn't, not willingly.
Yeah.
It wasn't just. It was like a 4-day journey or something. It was.
Yeah, it was a really long journey. So you get on this space elevator, either, up
14
in
hours.
space on the space station and you descend down to the planet, or on the other planet side, you go up. And yeah, it takes like,
They
3
said
or 4
14
days,
hours,
right?
I think it was only like 14 hours. I think.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Because I remember there's a scene there where Gal on her first ride down,
Yeah.
she's talking to the little girl and she's like, I'm gonna stay awake for the whole thing. you know?
Right.
So you get the sense it's almost a day, but I think I said it was approximately like 14 hours. or
Yeah, I
something.
may be right.
To get
Yeah,
to the
Linda just put up a
bottom.
good picture of the
Yeah.
space elevator
I
there.
love it. Oh man. But
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a hell of a construction project. And I mean, it's so tall that you could wrap cleanly
a good
around the
chunk of
planet.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So what'd you think of the show overall, Charles? So you've seen what the first
no,
three or
I've
so?
gotten into it. There's yeah, I mean, I have some, it's probably the same, like I said, to me, it's almost the same criticisms I have with the Dune stuff, but there's a lot of pompousness, and maybe that, I don't know.
That just comes with an empire.
I guess it does. If you're hanging out around kings and stuff, then
Right.
that's what you're going to get.
Right.
But it is, but like I said, I almost gave up the first episode, and then they got you. Then you're wondering about the math, and you're wondering,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
and
Mhm.
and society building on the back end, I guess. How's
Yeah.
that going to work out? All of that becomes pretty fun. So I'm going to probably follow it through. at this
Yeah.
point.
And
One of the things that I thought was really cool the way they did it was so they've unlike Dune, where you have these massive ships that are transiting the galaxy. You've got these smaller ships in the Foundation series, and they do kind of a hyperspace jump, I guess. They go into hyperspace and make a quick jump between worlds. And I thought it was really interesting, the ship design. When I first saw the ships, because they're almost like a vertical ship, right? It's kind of like a very slender, very tall ship, and then in the middle there's kind of a circle, and in that circle they kind of create a singularity type thing that opens this subspace gateway or whatever where they make the jump. And I thought it was very cool the way they did it, in that the ships almost remind me like a knife. They almost look like a knife. And when they're going through space, you see these tendrils of multicolored, almost like smoke coming off the leading edge of the ship backward. And it's almost as if that knife is actually tearing through space to get where it's at. And I think it sort of reflects the Empire in and of itself being sort of a kind of a ruthless place, and the Empire, ruling by a rule of force. I thought it was really a kind of a cool way to show how this Empire gets around from one part of the galaxy to the other. So just something I thought I'd throw out there for what it's worth.
yeah, the on the Empire piece, well, let's talk about the time changes here real quick. I will say one thing I appreciated was, as you mentioned earlier, Bill, the book series takes place over like 1,000+ years, right?
Yeah.
In the first few episodes, they managed to span maybe couple hundred years, and you do a good job moving forward and back, kind of jumping around this timeline, and it's done really, really well. In terms of who's around later on for different reasons of cryostasis or whatever, and who's long gone,
right?
And the Empire, again, to remind everyone, it's the same guy cloned, so you see him over this time. However, after 30-40 years or something, you have to remember that the one that was a kid then is now the middle-aged leader now, and the one that was the middle-aged leader then is now the old guy. And you see what I like about it is you kind of see this change in them and their personality over time, and approvals or disapprovals in what their younger selves are doing. And starting to, as you get deeper into the series, you start getting this questioning or thoughts that one of them may be defective, and that starts to play into the series a little bit more. So yeah, there's a Brother Day on the left and Brother Dawn on the right.
Brother Dusk.
Or Brother Dusk, thank you. Yeah, that gets a little bit like, when you start thinking about it, it's kind of hard to keep it keep it together.
Well,
but
and we might want to just jump in there also and point out that at a certain point, a formal transition takes place where Brother Dawn becomes Brother Day. Brother Day becomes Brother Dusk, and then a new clone is born. Well, a new clone is born that becomes Brother Dawn. A Brother Dusk becomes Brother Night, and at that point, he walks himself into a disintegration beam,
which is very,
and just becomes dust.
Yes, and just becomes a pile of dust on the floor.
You think they could have just retired him?
You would think. I don't think if I was that emperor, I think I would change that rule. Having watched myself walk into a disintegration beam in my old age, I think I would make a change.
That's coming.
Yeah. Let's change this.
He had to have come up on that on his own too, though.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. The original. So
the original, although you'll notice that the original emperor, so there's a room where
Yep.
all of the versions of the emperors that have ruled for, however, there's little monuments to them, but the one monument of the original emperor is there with him in it.
That's true. Yeah.
Preserved, right? So he did not, you'll notice, walk into the disintegration beam, or he would have been dust instead of a body. So
you're an emperor. Come up with a better way to die.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, when you're emperor,
come on.
Right. The other thing that's different from the books is the woman that plays Demerzel.
Yeah, Demerzel.
Yes. Yeah. So, of course, in the books, Demerzel is a male, but also Demerzel is an advisor sort of to the emperor in the beginning, but his function in the books is solely to try to influence the emperor in order to do things that are beneficial to the preservation and enhancement of humanity. And he realizes in the books that, and he's very long lived, so he's probably maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years old.
Demerzel,
right?
The premise of that is Demerzel has seen the Empire rise through all the different iterations of the clones.
Yeah. And so through that time, he has worked to keep humanity around and keep it going. This is in the books again. And he's realized that he can only do it by making very small, subtle changes. If he tries to make a big change, it usually ends up in a huge disaster and makes things worse. And so he is actually the one that pushes Harry Seldon to develop his theory of psychohistory. So that he can predict the future and help to direct humanity and preserve humanity. Because Demerzel, in the books again, sees the empire crumbling, and he brings that to Harry's attention, and he says, you can see this around you. Look at all of these things that are happening. And the interesting thing that really hit me as I'm reading that part of the book is that, and he's describing all of these things to Harry Seldon that you see, and as you look around our world today, I can see that now. The failure of infrastructure, the attitude of people where that's not my job, let somebody else worry about that kind of thing. And it's all these little things that he's painting in there, and I'm like, wow, this is where we are. I can see right now we're on the verge of this fall of maybe our own quote empire here. But so that was different, and it took me a little getting used to of Demerzel's revised role. I was okay with her being with Demerzel becoming a woman. That's fine. Just the fact that she was kind of there supporting the empire versus getting Harry started and kind of protecting humanity was different.
Quick question: we don't have to dive too deep into the books, but was the Empire aware that Demerzel went to Harry about so did it behind their back?
Right. And in fact, Demerzel, so there was like a mathematics conference on Trantor of the home world of the Empire. And Demerzel happened to go sit in on the conference. And that's where Harry talked about, if presumably you could develop the math, it might be possible to predict future events on a large scale. And Demerzel, the light bulb went off, and he said, look, I know this is going to collapse. We've got to figure out what is the right way to mitigate the disaster of the collapse and preserve things going forward. And so he goes to the emperor, tells the emperor that this guy has this mathematics and he can predict the future, and we need to bring him in and we need to support him, because if he predicts a future that says the empire is gonna last, then you're gonna be good to go. But if he predicts it's gonna fall, then you're gonna be in trouble. And so the emperor now takes an interest in Harry Seldon and in the books, and brings him in and starts doing it that way. So it was kind of a different approach to how it worked. But
All
right.
right, though,
Yeah.
Bill, since you're reading them, is there something in there about the the fall society here at the end
yeah.
that you think exists now but didn't exist in the 50s?
Ooh.
Um,
That's good. That's a good question, because given the
Mhm.
timing of when it was done, 1950s, 1960s,
Yeah, or is it
whatever.
stuff that really does always exist? I mean, I don't know,
Right.
because
I
I know
think-
when we watch old sci-fi films, and it seems like 50s attitudes were a little better.
yeah, I
You know,
think
but
that,
I don't know. I don't know if that's sometimes that's not real. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're
I think,
Rose-colored glasses.
yeah.
well, or whatever. Yeah,
I
it's
kind of
just-
thought about that as I was reading it. And in my mind, the 50s and the 60s, the US was really going gangbusters. We had a good economy. We had a lot of manufacturing here in the US. We were building rockets and going to the moon. We were creating the national interstate system. We were on a building boom, and we were really going. This country was just, expanding and growing like crazy. And now today, we've got all this infrastructure, but all you hear about is the fact that we've got bridges that are collapsing under vehicles, and, we need billions of dollars of infrastructure money in order to repair stuff and keep things going. And there seems to be a lot of hesitance to spend that money and to do that required infrastructure maintenance work. Everybody's always about, the newest and the greatest, but nobody wants to spend any money maintaining things. And so that was in the book. And that was kind of where I thought, that's kind of where we are today. And
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah. So yeah, I think, granted, there were problems and stuff in the 50s and 60s, but I think most of that was around the fact that we were developing these powerful nuclear arsenals, and that these hard lines were drawn between, capitalism and communism, and that we had the Soviet Union to deal with. And it wasn't that, we've moved all of our manufacturing away. So now the US is more of a service economy. We don't build anything here. We have to buy everything from some other country and bring it in. And we're letting our existing infrastructure kind of go to shit because we're so busy building the next thing that we're not maintaining things. So I think it's definitely different. And I think writing Dune back at that time, and a lot of the things that he talks about in the book that I'm seeing today in our world today, sort of prescient, I think.
Still means foundation, but yeah.
Yeah, right. So
Okay, so now that we're all depressed,
We needed that.
Well, I'm not depressed. I think I honestly think that's a great question, because you have to take into account what the world was like when these were written.
sure.
And they go into a lot of stuff that you have to wonder, when you get 40, 50, 60, 100 years down the line, how much of that either A, came true, or how much of that was that happened then,
It's all
never
perspective.
changed.
It's all perspective too, because the huge societal collapse may be a small price to pay for good sci-fi.
well, there's that.
I like
Yeah.
it. I like it.
Agreed.
I'm there
I
for
agree
it.
with that. Yeah.
So back to foundation. I mentioned earlier on the math side of it, right?
Yeah.
What can be predicted? There's let me grab her name real quick. The warden of the encampment there.
The warden's
on the
Salvor Hardin.
yes. So Hardin.
So this is the encampment on the planet Terminus, which is aptly named,
which is
because
where
it's
the
furthest planet out.
Sheldon's followers got banished to. Yep.
Right. So their colony is set up there. So Salvor Hardin's kind of running things, and this is like 35 years, I think, after Harry
Mhm.
bit the big one. So anyway,
yeah. So the settlers finally get there and they start building out their colony, and she's seen as the warden's seen as special. She's got some unique ability that walks up to this I'll call it anomaly for lack of a better word, or maybe an artifact that's on the planet, and that's her pictured there. And so she's standing guard, if you will, over the area, but she can walk up to this artifact, which no one else can seem to do. Everyone else either like blacks out and dies right there in the spot or whatever, trying to get as close as they can to this artifact. But there's a scene where they're interrogating someone, and she's literally pulling out information just off like the facial expressions and looking at this person, and you kind of get this weird sense that she is definitely more than just a warden, and maybe she's there for a purpose and or something. But there's a cool scene where she's flipping this coin and she's calling the
Heads or
basically
tails.
heads or tails
Yeah.
before it even lands, every time, down to complete accuracy. And she says it's not what was her saying, it's not luck, it's just math.
Right.
It's a crazy scary scene because it's really drilling into it, and she starts flipping the coin faster. Then she even just lets it fall to the floor and it's spinning there, and she calls heads or tails, and it falls on the one side, and she was like, what do you think, luck or just math? And so there's math it's not gone at this point, even though it may not be being taught on this colony as maybe they thought it would be or whatever. How big is science going to play a part? But she's definitely special in it, and it seems like a natural gift as opposed to being educated specifically in it. Something about the way her brain works.
Right. Yeah,
So
that was pretty cool. And it should be noted that periodically they reference the fact that Harry's math, as we've mentioned before, predicts the movement of large populations of people. It is not built to account for mutants, which she's considered to be kind of a mutant because of the fact that she can walk up to this artifact and not be affected by it.
She's some kind of anomaly to them,
right?
A mutant, something different about her.
And so there's some concern all along that a mutant can come along that throws a total monkey wrench into Harry's predictions of the future and his plans for humanity's recovery. And so at the point we're at in the series right now is we're wondering, is Salvor Hardin a monkey wrench that's going to throw his plan out of whack, or is it a monkey wrench that actually helps keep his plan on track, kind of a
or
thing?
Was the monkey wrench always a part of the plan?
Right.
We don't know. Right. Well, Billy, you probably know, having read the books or whatever, but
Bill, from your reading of the books, how much is this season covering? Is this going to be like a multi-season show, or are they going
it's going to be
all the books in?
No, it's going to be a multi-season show. And I think Apple's already greenlit season 2 of it. I think this season will probably cover most of book 1, I think. So there's 3 books in the original Foundation trilogy. And so this series is kind of mostly on book 1, although it does pull some stuff from the 2 prequel books that came out.
Okay.
But it doesn't really get into those very much. I don't think, I'm trying to remember, Rach figured heavily in the prequel books, not so much in the first book. And so I think we see that kind of in this first season here, where Rach was kind of in for a little bit, and now he's out. So I think this first season will be book 1, I think season 2, book 2, season 3, book 3. And it'll be interesting. There's actually so the third book, I think, is Second Foundation. So this colony that he's created on Terminus that we've mentioned, that's considered a foundation, Harry's foundation. And there's also a second foundation that he's created that is a secret foundation that has a totally different function, that is also designed to sort of bridge this interregnum between empires, right? And he realized from the math that he needed both of these, but he didn't tell anybody about the second one. So the second one is more of a group. So the first one is these mathematicians that are mathematicians and encyclopedists that are creating this galactic encyclopedia thing, and the mathematicians are there to make sure that everything stays on target. The other planet is a planet of people with mental powers, and we'll see that come out probably starting maybe the end of this season, but definitely probably next season, and certainly in the final season. So
sweet.
Yeah,
something to look forward to then.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens. So yeah, we're just getting your feet wet in the foundation. It's a huge universe. I hardly recommend reading the books. And there's some question that, well, he wrote the original trilogy first, and then he wrote 2 sequels, and then he went back and wrote 2 prequels. And should you read them in the order they were written? I read them in the order in which they were supposed to be. So the 2 prequels, then the trilogy, and then the sequels. And I was really glad I did that. That really helped lay a good foundation for the first book when I got into it. So things made a lot more sense. And I already had this huge picture in my mind of what the world looked like, especially the Emperor's homeworld of Trantor, because that was really laid out well in the first 2 books. So I would hardly recommend, if you're going to read it, read all 7 books, start at the very beginning and work your way through. You won't be disappointed. It's really a intriguing series. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's something I've been meaning to do, and I really want to get around to it, reading some of this classic sci-fi, rereading Dune. Yeah,
it was a good summer. We had the veranda to sit out on, on nice warm days, sit back there and read the book and start working my way through it, because I knew the Foundation trilogy or series was coming from Apple, so I definitely wanted to read the books first. I was glad I did. So I hardly recommend
Dune.
Yeah, I read Dune. It was many years ago. I haven't gone back and reread it, but I really like the movie. I've seen the other Dune movies, but I haven't seen that series that you're talking about. So I would like to see that. But yeah, I thought the latest movie by far so far is my favorite of the movies. And I'm really looking forward to part 2 of the Dune movie series. So we'll see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good deal. So yeah, go out and check out Foundation, because it's really good. It is.
Watch and read.
Watch and read.
Watch and read.
All right. Well, thanks for joining another episode. You can check us out on galacticdriftwood.space, where you can find this episode that you're already listening to, as well as all of our previous shows. And you can check out our partner podcast. We're a part of the Synergy Nation Network, synnation.net. That's SYN nation.net. And you can find us and some other podcasts that you may also find interesting out there. Until next time, have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.